Welcome back to Expressions, the podcast. Tonight we welcome fellow wrestling photographer and Gemini Award-winning producer, Steve Argintaru. I got it right, didn't I?
You did.
So bad. So bad.
It's all good, Brian.
That was an award-winning pronunciation, Brian.
There you go. Yay, I won an award. Thank you so much, man. Steve, I've known you for quite a while. Not necessarily known you like we hang out or anything, but through the wrestling world, I've seen you shoot, and you've been one of those guys that I look to. Like when I think of the top wrestling photographers, there's always Steve, there's always Jeffrey, who we've had on the show. And there's a couple other people down in like AEW and stuff like that. But I've always looked at you as the guy to look up to in this industry because you do it so well. You're awesome. I love your clarity. When I see a photo of that you've shot from even the latest stuff from like Edge and that, I make a photo from wrestling and I don't know, you may agree with me. When I share it, it's got a look. It's kind of grungy. It's a little darker. The colors are popping. When I see your shots, they look like if I'm there looking at it. And that is for people to be able to do that. I don't think anybody understands how difficult that can be. I rely on that look because sometimes the photos are just garbage and I've got to make them look that way. Right. Where you can make them look clear. And that's really impressive. So I'm really happy that you're here. I know that's not all we're going to talk about. We also are going to talk about your full-time gig, which I'm very excited to get into because that's the stuff I've wanted to know about. That's the stuff I wanted to know. Like, how do you get into that and what leads to this and so on. But before we do that, I want to say hi to John and Sean. Sean and John. Just got to say it in the right order. How's it going, guys?
I don't know who decided that order. Sean, you first. A lot more exciting stuff to talk about than me.
Oh, it's not that exciting. I'm good, dude. I feel like I haven't seen Brian in like, what, feels like 30 years?
At least a month.
Oh, man,
or 30
that's
years.
too long. It
has been a
feels
while.
like too long. I hate it.
I know.
I'm stoked to see Brian. I mean, I see John almost every day, really. We talk a lot, so.
You poor bastard. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm doing good. I went to my first fan expo ever this past weekend, so I got to be a super nerd for an entire day and not feel out of place. So it was nice. It was a good time.
You know, it's funny. For those watching, you might know if you've watched our history shows that we've done in the past. I know Sean through the skateboarding world. And the first time I met you, my buddy Mike kind of introduced us and we were doing some shooting. And you were like the coolest guy, absolute coolest guy, wearing cool clothes, doing cool tricks on your skateboard, you know, acting cool, partying the night before, but still able to be cool. Like, this is how I see you. And now you're like, finally get to geek out at this fest. So I love that. I love that the people today, you're not this, you're not that. Nobody is this or that anymore. Everybody is just everything and enjoying things and able to be happy doing things. So I love the fact that you say that, you know, you're able to geek out and be okay doing it. It's the fan expos and things like that I think give people permission a lot of times to just do that. And I think that should really bleed out to just being who you are in life. So I'm surprised you're not wearing your Spider-Man outfit here tonight.
Oh, I got it. Don't worry. It's on standby just in case.
You never know.
Oh, well, I'm glad to see you too, man. Not doing the show every week lately. We try and do them every week. Not doing them every week lately has left a hole on my Monday nights and I miss it. So let's get to talking. But John first, what about you, man?
Well, I had a slight flood in my apartment, which, you know, luckily nothing was damaged. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, some of that silicone caulking that you mentioned, Brian, thank you very much. Took care of pretty much everything. I went to Veg Fest in Burlington last weekend and ate some pretty good vegan food. Yeah. It was like a
vegan food. I thought that was like everybody gets like really stoned and just veggies.
To be fair, that sounds like a lot of fun, actually, as a co-product to and actually, so
what you did, I think, is a much better topic to get into.
It was awful because the food was really good, but I drank a lot the night before, and I ended up waking up way too late to like get to Burlington or whatever. So I grabbed the first set of shorts and t-shirt that I could find. I'm walking out of the house in like a camo set of shorts with stripes on my shirt. I'm like, who the fuck are you fooling? And then like this photographer comes up to me and is like, can I get a picture? And I was like, sure. So somewhere on the internet, there's me in this striped shirt and this camo set of shorts going like this. And I'm looking forward to finding it or having somebody I know find it. Anyway,
Now,
that was my weekend.
Striped shirt. Are you talking like an American stripe, like a flag shirt?
Oh yeah, like a flag. Yeah.
Seriously?
No.
Okay,
It's just black, yellow, kind of gray. It's like a Volcom shirt. I don't know.
All right, whatever. It was a shirt, and you felt uncomfortable.
Brutal combination. Yeah.
Note to self: don't wear that again when you go out.
You got to pick one pattern, man. You got to pick if you're gonna wear a pattern on your pants. You got to wear a blank shirt or something. That's all I'm saying.
Awesome.
I'm stressed out about it. Can you tell I'm stressed? Yeah,
I can tell just a little bit. That's okay. You're allowed.
But I'm excited to talk to Steve. It's not often that you're in the company of a Gemini Award winner, and
that's true. That is actually really cool.
Not often.
Never for me. This is a first. So that's awesome. Now, before, of course, we have to clarify before the show started. These guys are both like, "What's the Gemini Award?" And I'm like, "Okay, let's check it out because we want to know for sure."
Man, we're old.
I know, right? It's basically the Canadian Emmys. It's a Canadian broadcasting award for excellence.
Well, it's now known as the Canadian Screen Awards.
Huh.
Well, that makes sense.
It used to be called the Geminis.
Was there some sort of politically correct thing? Gemini like raped children when he was.
You're looking too far into this.
Yeah, that's never good. Yeah. Anyway,
probably.
Let's hope not. But Steve, awesome that you're here. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And we're not going to talk about all silly stuff all night. I have a lot of great things to talk about. But we have to be silly at the beginning because that's who we are, the soul. First of all, I know you as a wrestling photographer. How did that start for you? I know how it started for me. We had Gigi on here before. We know how it started for him. I mean, everybody's story in wrestling, I find, is as unique as the people themselves, obviously. Wrestlers themselves get into it for so many different reasons. I got into it because my wife is a super fan and I just liked being with her, and we went to wrestling and I just took pictures. What was your origin story per se for getting into that?
So a friend of mine got me into wrestling probably when I was around 14, which I think, maybe kind of late in life for a lot of people who are Uber fans. So a friend of mine got me into it, so I started watching it on TV. He actually brought me to a couple of cards at Maple Leaf Gardens. So that was kind of my first foray into live wrestling. And pretty cool to think that, in light of everything that's happened, Maple Leaf Gardens being, turned into a grocery store. It's kind of nice to know that I was able to see, some hockey games, Globetrotters games, and of course, pro wrestling there. But I would go there and I just started, for no real reason, bringing my camera, just because I couldn't even tell you why. It just seemed like kind of a neat thing to, not even distract me. I just wanted to do it. So I started bringing my camera to wrestling events. And then, after a few, I just couldn't imagine going without. And talking about how times have changed, if you guys have been to sporting events, like major league professional sporting events, you cannot possibly get into Scotiabank Arena with, a long lens camera. No chance. They will not let you in. But, back in the day, back in the mid 80s, late 80s, things were different. So I was able to get in there. And honestly, like, the pictures weren't great. I had no idea what I was doing. I was, 16, 17. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was fun. Again, back then, no digital, it was all on film. You take it to, a photo mat and you get it developed. And, there was that excitement of seeing how they turned out. So I didn't really get serious until the WrestleMania 6 news conference. So for people that don't know, WrestleMania is the WWE's big, it's called the Super Bowl of Wrestling. It's their big annual event. And for the first time in 1990, it came to Canada, to Toronto, at Skydome, as it was known back then. And so I was at a card at Maple Leaf Gardens in February of that year. I'm actually going to narrow down the date for you. It was February 4th.
Wow.
And they made an announcement during the intermission that tomorrow, meaning the next day on the Monday, that there would be a news conference at Skydome involving the two wrestlers who were going to be in the main event of WrestleMania 6 in Toronto, that being Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior.
Nice.
And I thought to myself, oh my God, that's the coolest thing ever. At the time, I was in university at Western. So I guess that I would have been probably 19 or 20, I guess. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to get in as, and I'm sorry, I should say I was working at the university radio station at the time. What the connection is between radio and photography, we'll just ignore that there isn't really one. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to use my status as a member of the media, or my perceived status, and try to get in there. So again, difference between, the way things work now and the way things work, in 1990. I literally went to the Skydome that morning, on the Monday morning, checked in at the media table. Hi, Steve Argintaru with CHRW Radio Western. Okay, sure. Go in and have a seat. So me with my camera bag walked in and literally sat in the front row. And out comes Mean Gene Okerlund, who is the host, and brings out Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. And that was the first time I got up close and personal, not just shooting from, the seats in the Reds at Maple Leaf Gardens, which was like the second level, not, ringside, which is where I eventually wound up. I had, pretty consistently third row ringside seats in the corner at Maple Leaf Gardens. But these were like great pictures. I don't mean the quality of it. I just mean the access that I had. So I drove back to London to Western. Without even having developed the pictures yet, I cold called Bill Apter, who was the face of Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. And I'd known about the magazine. I'd been subscribing for, 5 years at that point, 4 or 5 years. And somehow, again, cold calling, got in touch with him and said, hey, I was at this press conference in Toronto, took some pictures, wondering if you're interested. He's like, yeah, absolutely. Please send them. Gave me his, the address to send it to. And then he said, by the way, do you also shoot the wrestling shows? And I said, yeah, I go all the time. He goes, well, we definitely be interested. So let us know the next time you go and we'll talk. So that's kind of how it started, how it evolved, I guess, from just being this hobby, just something to kind of keep me occupied during shows, to something I was actually trying to do as, I wouldn't say it was a job, but, it was, again, kind of exciting to get paid for something that you were just having fun doing.
Yeah, cold calling right at the top, Bill Apter. I mean, he's still somebody who's known today as an authority in publishing for wrestling since day one, pretty much. So that's awesome. That's very cool. And it's interesting too. Paul Heyman pretty much got his start the same way, right? He just went to New York City and just took pictures there and submitted those photos and said, hey, buy my photos or whatever. The next thing you know, he's Paul Heyman. So
you know who else got to start that way? Sonny.
Really?
Yes.
I would not have thought Sonny was a photographer.
So the way I found that out, interestingly enough, through my job at TSN, I'm no longer there, but when I was at TSN, Sonny came in for a taping of Off the Record. And I decided to interview her for the TSN website, which was, again, this was like 1996, 97. So really in its infancy, but we did a video interview. So it was actually taped on the Off the Record set, taped through the control room. So with, the highest quality broadcast cameras, and that got uploaded to the website. But anyway, just in talking to her in the green room before the taping, she told me that, that's how she started. She was a photographer, and her pictures were noticed, and that's how she got into wrestling.
That's really cool. Actually, for Sean and John to know who we're talking about, in the middle of that is Sonny.
Wow.
Yeah.
At one point, the most downloaded celebrity on AOL.
AOL,
like celebrity, goodness. like all of entertainment. It was her.
She was definitely a hot topic for many years, and still
I'm
currently
seeing
pops
this.
up.
Yeah, apparently, according to the headline there.
Yeah. So interesting. And yeah, I mean, there's so many different stories, like I said earlier, and reasons why we get into it. Obviously, you have a passion for wrestling. You started much younger than I did, which, it's interesting. I didn't really get started until I met my wife, Shelly. And interesting, Shelly was at WrestleMania 6. So she went to that. And her birthday is February 5th, the day before you saw that thing on, or day after.
No, it was February 5th was the day of the news conference.
There you go. So interesting coincidences there. My wife, she's just awesome. But anyway, speaking of wives, family, and so on, what does your family think about your fascination with pro wrestling?
They hate it. They absolutely
seriously.
They are embarrassed by the fact that I like it.
Offensive.
Yeah, I kind of take it with a grain of salt because I think, it's a very polarizing kind of, I guess, pastime. I think you either love it or hate it. I think you either accept it for what it is or you think it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. My two sons were into it for about 2 years. And one of the biggest thrills that I had, I don't think they were as enthused about it. They were fans at the time, but when they were, I want to say 11-9 or 10-8, I got them backstage at a Monday Night Raw in Toronto, and they literally met everybody, like Triple H, Chris Jericho,
wow,
Trish Stratus, like just Shawn Michaels, like
the Heartbreak Kid,
Kid, like who's who, Batista.
During the peak of wrestling.
The peak.
During one of the peaks of wrestling, for sure.
Sure.
So that was really, I mean, again, it was more cool for me. I had my camera there backstage, so I was taking pictures of my boys, standing with the wrestlers. So very cool. I still look back on the memories to this day. Like I said, I don't think they look at it as fondly as I do, but I still think that's one of the coolest things I've ever had a chance to do in wrestling.
That is very cool. And that's actually answered a question I was going to ask you later on anyway. And that's so perfect. You're talking like that. And I'm just remembering going to like Ring of Honor events and having pictures with Shelly and all these different wrestlers that she's always looked up to. And it's an amazing feeling when you get to meet these guys. I mean, these guys are traveling, and women, of course, are traveling all over the world, performing in some cases back in the day, every night at times.
Yep.
And twice on Sunday, and
literally
they come to your little village, your little town, and you think, oh my God, these guys are heroes. These guys are the most incredible things. I love that in this day and age, now that there's the WWE network and so on, we're able to really learn a lot about the history and the backstories and all these different interesting things that went on behind the scenes in wrestling. You must have a really cool story or two of your time in wrestling, shooting wrestling, stuff that you've come across. Maybe you can think of one in particular that would be like, wow, that was one of those really cool moments, aside from obviously taking your kids in the back. That's a really cool pride thing, of course.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, there were a couple things that they weren't necessarily all, positive stories, but I remember being at the hotel where the wrestlers stayed when we found out that Brutus Beefcake had been in a parasailing accident.
Yeah.
And I think there was a show in Toronto on either the 4th or the 5th of July, because I think the accident happened on the 4th. And that was just the buzz, like being in the lobby of the hotel. That's all anybody was talking about. And, again, being, I wasn't officially a reporter back then, but I just remember the spidey senses tingling and God, I should tell somebody. And I remember calling Bill again. He was my guy at PWI and saying, hey, did you know about this? And I don't think he did at the time. So he was going to follow up. I didn't really have anything more other than the fact that it happened. But that certainly is a story that comes to mind. Another one is just the lead up to the Montreal screw job.
Wow. Yeah.
That was, again, through, my time at TSN, we had Bret Hart in to do a taping of Off the Record literally 2 days before the Survivor Series in Montreal in '97. And he went on, and there were, again, it was the infancy of the internet, but there were still, newsletters that were out there, and there were still, all these stories about how Brett's contract was expiring, and there was some, question about what was going to happen, and would he relinquish the title, and how it was going to happen. And there were all these rumors, and that was one of the stories that, Michael Landsberg, the host, was talking to Brett about. And I remember talking to Brett after the show and just saying, hey, what do you think's going to happen? He's like, man, I really don't know. I know the ref, Earl Hebner. I just hope everything, goes okay. And that was kind of it. We were, I think we were walking outside. He was walking to his car that was going to take him back to his hotel. And then, so that was on a Friday. There was a show in Toronto that night that I was actually shooting at ringside for. So not like ringside seats. I was actually on the other side of the barricade, right up at the ring, which was, again, one of the coolest things, because they don't allow you to do that anymore unless you work for them. And then I went with a friend on Sunday to Survivor Series in Montreal, and I was ringside, but I was behind the barricade, but I was ringside for the Montreal screw job. And
did you get spit on?
I was about to say, I was literally probably 4 people over. You can actually see me in one of the videos, and one of the
my God,
that I'm, couple rows behind and just a little off to the side when Brett spits at Vince.
He had some wicked aim with that spit.
Yeah, I know. I got some incredible shots from that night that I've actually shared with Brett on a couple of times, on a couple of occasions. There's one guy, sort of a friend of the family, who's at one time working on a book about Brett, and I remember he asked me for my pictures, and I gave him, I had again, back then, in the film era, I had 4 or 5 rolls, and I just kind of gave him, copies of it. And I don't think the book ever happened, and I don't think I ever got those prints back. But anyway, one of those things that happened. But
film.
I remember that because I just felt like I was, not really in the know, but I was kind of close enough to things that were going on, to know that he was worried going into it that something was going to happen. And then when it happened, obviously everybody knew that, the screw job was on, I think before it was even called the Montreal screw job. I remember actually, embarrassingly enough, my wife's going to cringe when she hears me say this, but I remember yelling from my ringside position, Brett, you got screwed. Brett, you got screwed.
Wow.
Because we really believed it. Because
he did.
He did. And again, that's why I kind of, people who say, oh no, it's a work, it didn't, Brett was in on it. No, I'm telling you from everything that I know and from being around, unless Brett is the greatest actor in history, that was a shoot, as they say. That was as real as it gets. And
insider knowledge.
I've seen him on Lonesome Dove.
Again, like I said, I don't consider myself an insider, but I did have enough working knowledge. I knew a few people at WWE Canada or WWF Canada at the time, so I hung around after the show. And one of the guys is a referee, Jim Corderas, who I'm still great friends with to this day. And Jimmy was one of the guys I talked to afterwards, and people were just walking around like zombies, like they just could not believe what happened.
Well, especially considering one of the wrestlers went into the back room and literally punched the owner of the company in the eye.
Yeah. And we didn't know that at the time. We obviously we hadn't heard that, but thank goodness just for all of our knowledge that there was a documentary crew, which, by the way, that was Brett's. So when Brett was on Off the Record, that was, I think, his second time in 2 months being on Off the Record, and both times he had this documentary crew following him around. So we were very familiar with the fact that that he had people documenting his almost every move. And but fortunately they put a mic on him. They got some unbelievable shots backstage that without it, I don't know that we would have known the complete truth.
So true. So true. I didn't even thought of that. I mean, that wasn't common practice back then to have a film crew following around a wrestler. So
I would say it was.
I wonder if Vince even expected that.
Extremely rare.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
What a story. What a thing to be a part of. Wow.
The fact that you spoke to Brett the Hitman Hart is crazy to me.
Well, Brett's He's still doing his thing. Like he was at a wrestling event local, and the promoter gave me a call and asked if I was free to go and shoot some video behind the scenes when he was in town, and I wasn't free. And
that was the one I think that was the one I was ring announcing for. That was Greek Town.
That's right, Greek Town.
Yep.
Okay, that's another thing. Ring announcing. I mean, that's photography, ring announcing. I mean, that's kind of different. I would never want to do a ring announcing thing. So
I guess, the way I got into media, the way I became really interested in media and specifically broadcasting was I had two people that I really admired as a kid growing up. One was Marie Eldon, who was the PA announcer for the Toronto Blue Jays when they were at Exhibition Stadium. The shortstop, number 1, Tony Fernandez. I would do that all the time. And the second one was Howard Finkel, who was the longtime ring announcer at Madison Square Garden for the WWF, worked behind the scenes, but then also just became the voice of the WWF at all events, especially, the big pay-per-views. And he would have, just the most recognizable calls, especially when there was a new champion. And new. So I would walk around, like as a kid, I would just walk around imitating him. It was the greatest thing. Anyway, never really had any aspirations to do that. Not seriously anyway. And so I'd been shooting, obviously, WWF for a very long time. A friend of mine got me into shooting indie wrestling probably around 2010. So I've been doing that for a few years. And the promoter for Greektown called me one time, I want to say this was like around 4 or 5 years ago, and said, is there anything you've always wanted to do in wrestling that you've never had a chance to do? And I don't know, like in my head, I started thinking, like, does he mean booking? What is he talking about? And then it just kind of hit me. I said, you know what? Like, I've always loved ring announcing. And I wasn't even really being serious. I just said, yeah, like I'm a big mark for Howard Finkel. He goes, well, do you want to do it? I'm like, are you serious? I said, yeah. I go, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. He goes, okay, you're on for the next show.
Nice.
And that's how it started. I honestly, other than, a few things, I did a lot of radio in university, but that was, 25 years earlier. Most of the stuff I'd done in media had been behind the scenes, producing on the assignment desk, that kind of thing. So being in front of the camera, as it were, and performing wasn't something that I was really used to, or, I guess even comfortable with the idea of, but it was, just one of those things where I thought, this is a great opportunity. Let's go for it. And been doing it ever since. So like I said, it's been probably like 4.5 years, I think,
that
awesome. I've been doing it, and it's been great.
Yeah, so much fun. And yet another avenue of being a part of the business that you can try out. And
yeah, I mean,
because as a ring announcer, you got to know everything that's going on. I mean, you're right.
Yeah, like I find myself at the Greektown shows. I don't know, again, I know this doesn't work obviously for, AEW or WWE, but I find, at the indie shows that I'm doing ring announcing for, I'm also acting as kind of like a floor manager or floor director, where you're always kind of worried about who's coming out next year. I'm talking to the music guy. Okay, just making sure you have the right music queued up, and okay, this guy's coming out first, followed by this guy, and because you're on your own. I don't have an earpiece, so I don't know if somebody's. So I'm always checking. Okay, the next the next guy up is whoever. Is he behind the curtain, ready to come out? Okay, great. Because you don't want to be caught, because you're kind of the face of it. So, but again, the other great thing about ring announcing is that I've had the opportunity. Not that I don't try to be Howard Finkel, but when I in my head imagine all of the big names that he's announced for, like I've had a chance now to introduce Bret Hart. I've had a chance to introduce Ricky the Dragon Steamboat to his entrance music that he used in the 80s. Like, it just, to me, those little moments, like I'm probably the only one that really embraces it. It's because it's a very personal thing for me. But it's given me those opportunities, which I love that.
Steve, this is why we do this show. We do this show because we want to embrace the things that are important to us, that keep us happy. that keep us energized and excited. And that is awesome. I mean, that's absolutely something that I would carry with me in high. Like my moment is hanging out with Jake the Snake, right? That one moment that I had with Jake the Snake it still carries with me today. So I can only imagine how these moments have stuck with you. That's awesome. It's too bad though that your family isn't more into it. I guess, I get it though, because I wasn't into it until older. Like I said, I used to think of it as kind of like a hillbilly thing, like a bunch of, backwoods people would like their wrestling and this and that. It's wrestling. It's because when I was in Simsbury, when I was living in Connecticut, Carl Boehm was this kid that I knew, and he liked wrestling, and I kind of saw him as that kind of guy. Mm-hmm. So I just associated wrestling with that kind of guy, and it wasn't until Shelley welcomed me into the world and I met Ron Hutchinson that I was like, this is incredible. I mean, the stories that go on, it's just never ending. So I love talking to you about it. I really appreciate you spending the time going into some of those details. But I have a question about your photography, because you said earlier, not all great. They weren't all great photos when you first started shooting. What was your learning curve? How did you progress? Like what did you take courses? Did you put yourself into, was it just on the job kind of thing where you just practiced, or?
It was trial and error. It was, I took literally one photography course, and that was a postgraduate. So I went to Western for 4 years, took a year off, decided I want to go into journalism. So my first year at Humber, I was in a postgraduate journalism program, and you took basically 5 courses: radio, TV, newspaper, magazine, and photography. So for, one semester, I took photography, and that was really it. So I learned a lot there about, lighting and aperture and shutter speed, and how those, those interact with each other. But beyond that, not really. And partly because it was never a full-time job for me. I had a full-time job. And I don't know if I didn't think I could make money at it. So it was just never something I seriously pursued. It was always a hobby that occasionally I thought, well, that'd be kind of cool if I could, sell a few pictures to the magazine. It's spending money. It's, if I want to travel, or if I want to upgrade my camera equipment, I'll get some money to do that. But it was never, again, because I never really seriously considered it as a profession, I didn't really go that extra step like I did with my actual career in media and going to school and doing internships and those kinds of things.
Awesome. And it makes sense though. I mean, nobody really thinks that just doing what you love to do can just pay all the bills. So it's good that you had your backup plan, I guess you could say. Speaking of which, it's been fun talking about wrestling, but we got to talk about your full-time gig, because to me, that is equally, if not more interesting, because now you're working with TSN, you're traveling the world, you're working with all these different companies doing producing of these shows that you love to watch. I mean, that must have been a rush, the first time that you were able to actually produce something to do with this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was at Humber in this postgraduate journalism program, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And when it came time to do an internship, I thought, well, I did a lot of sports when I was in university working at the radio station. So I actually had my own wrestling show, but I was the sports editor. I did play-by-play for Mustangs football and hockey and reporting for basketball, and did all sorts of things. And I thought, not that I knew everything, but I wanted to start, I wanted to get some experience in news and some other aspects of journalism. So I looked into, City TV and CFTO and CBC, and just for very global also. And for various reasons, it just didn't work out. So I had to choose. TSN was offering an internship. The timing worked out. I thought, all right, I'll do, go to TSN from September to December, and then figure out what I want to do after that. So I was doing a few things, nothing, that kind of blew my socks off. It was just more, I was watching satellite feeds. They had me do a couple of highlights, one of which was America's Cup sailing. I knew nothing about sailing. I didn't want to know anything about sailing, but I that was kind of my first foray into actually producing or writing something that appeared on air. So Dennis Conner was the, I don't know if you call him a skip, whatever. It was his boat for the US, and they were always going against New Zealand, I believe. So that was the first thing I did. And then I worked at like a local community cable station after that. But when I was at TSN, so like I said, my internship went until December. December is when obviously a lot of people go on vacation, take time off for the holidays. So they needed people. So I guess I had impressed enough people that I was asked to freelance. So that's how things started. I started freelancing there, picked up shifts, picked up more shifts, got a contract, eventually got on staff, and kind of progressed my way up the ladder to the assignment desk. And then as senior producer, gotten to really travel to all sorts of places, like literally, I guess, travel the world. I've been to London for the Olympics. I went to Moscow for the World Cup announcement when Canada was awarded the 2026 World Cup along with the US and Mexico. Yeah, I've been to.
That wasn't too long ago, the Russia
trip.
No,
2018. I was in. I'm a huge baseball fan. I was doing all the baseball all-star games. So I've been to 14 or 15 different ballparks in the U.S., which has been, again, just as a fan, an awesome experience. Now I am freelancing. So right now I'm working on a documentary with Uninterrupted Canada on Cfl Rivalries, and the one that we're working on right now is between the Hamilton Tiger Cats and Toronto Argonauts, which is terrific. As again a sports fan growing up, well aware of the rivalry. I know about the Ballard Cup. I don't know that the players that are playing right now have any idea what the Ballard Cup is or who Harold Ballard is or was, but I certainly am aware of it, and it's been a great experience. The players are just a joy to deal with. The teams are very accommodating and giving us all sorts of great access. I mean, we're doing it in partnership with the two teams and the league, so they are, they have a reason to be cooperative. But in general, I've found throughout my career that CFL players are just very accommodating, very down to earth, great to deal with.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
So when you're working in this capacity, obviously you're traveling around and doing all that. What are you doing? You're producing, but are you like? I know that in your LinkedIn it had that you were doing clips, highlight reels, and stuff like that. But obviously, there's so much more.
Yeah. So when I go on the road, I'm basically producing the segments that will appear on the news shows, or if we put it on the website. So I would be basically, let's take an example of an all-star game. So the last all-star game I covered, I believe, was in 2017 in Miami. So I had a reporter, Paul Hollingsworth. I had our baseball analyst, Steve Phillips, former GM of the New York Mets. And we have a cameraman. His name is Kevin Smith. And so we're basically this team that's on the ground. I've prepared ahead of time. I know the storylines going in. We kind of know what we want to cover. About what the media availabilities are. So we'll sort of strategically kind of plan ahead. Okay, we know we only have, 40 minutes or 45 minutes with the American League All-Stars. So we want to get the Blue Jays. So here's who's playing, here's who's on the roster. We want to get a couple other guys. These are the storylines, because again, to cover however many players there were at the time on each side, whatever it was, 30, I think with the inflated rosters, you only have 40 minutes. You want to get to all these different players. You don't always get the first question. So you really have to strategize about, what our priorities are. So we want to cover this story. We want to ask these players these questions. And then you kind of gather everything together. You figure out what you want to do. I'm dealing, we're going live at 6:00, dealing with the lineup producer in Toronto. I'm worrying about the technical aspects, how we're going to get on the field. Worried about our signal getting through to Toronto. Basically anything and everything that emanates from that location, I am doing my best to worry about. If I can't take care of it myself, at least I'm trying to find people who can help.
Wow, that's a lot of hats, a lot of juggling of things.
He's the problem solver.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like that's how I honestly, that's really how I looked at, especially when I was an assignment editor. That's kind of how I describe myself, as a problem solver. If somebody came to me and said, we need to get a feed out of this place, or, we have a conflict here, that, I kind of looked at that as my job, as being the one who solved it. One of, the nicer compliments I got from a reporter who used to work there was, that, I was so even keeled, and I had like the perfect personality or persona for that position, because, it's a leadership position, and if people see you freaking out, they're going to freak out. And if people see you, on pins and needles and not being able to focus, they're probably going to be the same way. So if you can be calm, you can kind of project that calmness to the rest of the newsroom, everything hopefully will run smoother and things will get done. So I've always kind of kept that in mind and tried to lead by example that way.
Yeah, it's a lot easier said than done. So,
yeah. But like I said, I think with me, it's just
that's
innate. It's just, it's my demeanor. It's how I've always been in probably, every situation, both personally and professionally. So for me, it does come a little more naturally, and I realize it's not for everyone, but, again, that's why I think that, I was well suited for that position. And definitely when I go on the road and you have a million things flying at you, I can kind of, put everything in its own box and figure out where we want to go and prioritize what needs to be done right away and take it from there.
That's great.
The world needs people with that kind of temperament too, because a lot of people who are supervisors above me, even the way I work, if you are walking around, like you said, on pins and needles and seem like you're stressed out, then the rest of your team, the people that are looking at you, are going to be like, oh, well, he obviously has no idea what he's doing. So
exactly.
What does that mean about me?
Yeah. So even if I didn't know what I was doing, I tried to pretend that I knew that I did.
Fake it till you make it.
Right. And that's sometimes what you need.
It's true. It's a hard thing to do, though, to balance that. I do it all the time at work. That's pretty much all I do, is fake it until I make it. Sean, John, any questions you'd like to ask before we move on to the next segment here?
Yeah, Sean, how's it going over there, buddy?
Yeah.
I'm just like fighting a cough. I've been smoking on this thing all day, so I'm trying not to like interrupt.
That's kind of like fighting itself, though, isn't it? You're fighting a cough and smoking on this thing,
Yeah, no. It's
eliminate one and you'll help the other.
It's a whole contradicting like thing. So, Steve, is there any I'm trying to figure out how to word this where I don't sound like a complete idiot. So, in your line of work, like, it seems like there's like a shitload of pressure and people expect like a lot of you. Like, do you just like brush it off like it's nothing, or does it like actually like get to you in like a serious way?
There are occasions probably where it does get to me. But I think I'm pretty good at sort of breaking down what the issues are and then kind of figuring it out from there. And sometimes you just need some time away. I think that's also kind of what I've learned, that even if you don't have the answer on the spot, there's nothing wrong with, taking some time or telling someone, you know what, give me a little bit, let me figure it out, let me get back to you, as long as you actually do follow through and get back to the person.
Yeah.
But there is a solution for most things, and it may not be the ideal one, but you do have to just push through. So that's kind of the way I've always looked at it.
Awesome. I have a question, actually on the back of that one. Do you have any sort of like techniques to keep you sort of like any sort of mental exercises that you do to keep yourself sort of well-rounded in these situations? You know what I mean? Like, for anybody who's maybe stressed out or anything like that, because you seem like the guy to talk to. I don't know. Like, you've been talking for a second here, and you seem very, very calm.
He's like super,
well, John, I'd love to. If I had a secret, I'd probably be writing books and selling it, and not giving it away here on the Expressions podcast.
Yeah.
But no, honestly, like I said, I just think it's everybody's got different personalities. Everybody handles stress in different ways. this happens to be a strength. You know, there are certainly areas where, you know, I probably feel I could be better, you know, especially in the media. Like sometimes I feel like I'd be, you know, maybe more creative. And I think there's a balance sometimes that if you're a little more even keeled, maybe you don't have, you know, your brain can only do one thing really well at one time. And maybe that means that you're not using the creative side at the same time as well as you could, or with as much potential as you have. But like I said, I think in the positions that I've been in leadership, you know, those characteristics to me are important in the moment, and you can always take sort of time away. And that's what I've done sometimes is I've kind of gone away, and then if I have an idea, I'll kind of come back and go, you know what, why don't we do this or what, you know. But like I said, in the moment, you know, if bullets are flying, so to speak, I've always been the one to kind of try to just keep calm, and hopefully that sort of projects to everyone else.
I think that comes a lot with experience too. You know, when you're doing something that you feel confident in doing.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, you've already mentioned that you were at the press conference for WrestleMania 6. That was 1990. So you've got a year or two where you've been, you know, putting this all to the test. And I'm sure that just doing this stuff gives you that experience where at this point in your career, you're just drawing from your database of fixes for everything.
Yeah, totally. And it's, you know, one of these things where, you know, you're in the presence of people that you see on TV, and I think like everything else, gradually it just becomes, you know, your work, and it doesn't seem like as big a deal, whether it's, you know, again, working with the anchors, the hosts that you grew up watching on TSN, for example, or working with athletes that, you know, again, like very early in my career when I was, you know, I mean, it wasn't when I first started at TSN, but when I first started going out and you know, covering games, you know, like I remember I interviewed Mario Lemieux, I interviewed Charles Barkley, I interviewed Shaq at one point, Wayne Gretzky. You know, it's at some point you sort of stop seeing them as, you know, these you know, folk heroes, and you just look at them as, okay, they're professional athletes, they're doing their job just like, you know, I'm here doing my job. And yeah, there's a certain amount of like, you know, early on where you're kind of talking to yourself and you're going, okay, just, you know, keep calm, keep, you know, don't freak out. Don't, you know, it's not hero worship. Like just ask a question. But eventually you just get used to it. And eventually it just becomes, you know, again, your job. So, you know, whether it went from sports to wrestling or wrestling to sports, just again, you know, being able to just talk to people as human beings and not as athletes, not as, you know, sports gods. You know, I think that really helps you just focus on your job and what you need to do. So I don't get freaked out by those things anymore. I kind of laugh inside when people do, like not in a like aren't you silly way, but just as a like, I remember I was probably like that way back, and you get through it, right? Eventually you get through it, and it's kind of nice to see people maintain that innocence of, you know, oh my God, I'm in the presence of, you know, this person. And, you know, yeah, and maybe there's a certain amount of, you know, regret at losing that innocence, but I think it just comes with, you know, with the job, like with the job specifically that I was doing. When you're, you know, when you're a reporter or producer and you're interviewing, you have to maintain a professional relationship. So you can't treat them any differently than you treat your fellow producer, for example.
But you're still human. So have you ever popped completely hard for somebody that you've been interviewing? Or
I was literally just thinking about asking him the same thing.
There you go. There has to be some.
Like a real fanboy moment, you know?
Wow. I think.
You could say no.
Yeah, like I want to be honest. I want to obviously I want to try to give you a real life example. I can't remember an occasion where I did, because even if I think I was freaking out on the inside, I probably kept it together on the outside, which, you know, again, I know not everybody necessarily can do. I think I'm probably pretty good at that. You know, I think the first time I met Hulk Hogan, and again, it wasn't because I was interviewing him. I think I was just, you know, as a fan, saw him in the lobby of the hotel. I probably freaked out a little. But, you know, again, that would have been, you know, probably well over 30 years ago. So
Yeah.
not that I can remember. If I think of
Fair
anything
enough.
before the end of this podcast, I'll let you know.
All right. Very good. Very good.
I can honestly say that a couple of the people you mentioned here that you spoke to probably wouldn't be able to keep it together over here.
Yeah, probably me too. Me too.
Yeah.
There have been a few people that have crossed my path that I've been just like, I couldn't speak. I just like,
Yep.
and then the words come out stupid. Like, to be honest with you, our episode that we had Tally Roden on, Tally is a stunt woman. The first thing I was said to her as soon as we started the show, I was like, hi, and it has this really goofy, high, crazy voice, like I'm some fanboy. Just like, oh my God, this is Tally Roden. So no, I still do get that way, but good for you. I think it's awesome. I really respect your career and what you've done with it, where you've come from and how you've been able to meet all these different people. It's not easy forging yourself a career, A, doing what you love to do, but B, doing it in media, especially with all the firings and the hirings and the people buying these people and the people buying those people. To navigate through that successfully, it takes a lot of determination and it takes a lot of persistence. So, good on you. Congratulations for
Thanks,
doing
man.
So well. Seriously, I love it.
Thanks.
We have.
Sorry,
go ahead. No, after you.
No, I was just going to say, like I said earlier, like I think it's partly it's a function of the era that I broke in, because I don't think that I would get a lot of those opportunities these days. But I think it's also, you have to sometimes make your own opportunities. You have to force yourself to to be at events that you wouldn't normally be at, to go out, to maybe take off half a day of work because you think that's important to be at, and it might pay off dividends down the road.
Network, everyone.
Yeah,
Come on.
that's what it's about. Yep.
And you know what? That when you made the leap between being in radio and then I'm a media person, like, how many people just wouldn't do that? They'd be like, oh, I can't do that. That's something I shouldn't be. Yeah. Like, and again, it could have been a function of the time as well. Like cold calling somebody with, you said, what was it? Wrestling Illustrated. What was the magazine?
Pro Wrestling Illustrated. PWI.
Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Awesome. Yeah. See, like these kinds of things nowadays, I don't think anybody would even try. So it's a very impressive career you've had. And yeah, I'm in awe.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I think it's also, I think you also have to treat yourself professionally and just be nice to people, because I think the message that I've tried to impart over the last few years is that no matter how talented you are, you're not going to get anywhere without some help, without people opening some doors for you. And, I think certainly, if I look at things that I've done, in wrestling, specifically with WWE, like none of that would have been possible without, TSN's relationship with the WWF/WWE in the early days. And Carl DeMarco, who is the president of WWF Canada, giving me some of those opportunities. They used to send a couple of the wrestlers on this charity flight called Dream Stake Flight, where they would fly down, 250 underprivileged kids from Toronto to Orlando, literally for the day. They leave like 7 a.m. and come back at 1 a.m. the same day. And
wow.
So one year, Carl called me and said, hey, we're doing this. Trish Stratus and Val Venus were on the first flight. This was, I want to say, 2004. And he said, why don't you come with us? Great. And that turned into 7 straight years of going down to Disney World for the day on this charity flight. And yeah, cool, obviously spending some time with, some of these wrestlers, but also, seeing the way the kids' faces light up and seeing how the wrestlers interacted, and really gave the kids their time, was quite inspiring. But, by the same token, I would go down there, we would shoot things for WWE, both still photography and video. So I developed a relationship. Well, here's another sort of tie. So I would develop a relationship with the WWE production office, which down the road led to me getting that backstage tour with my 2 kids when they were into wrestling. So again, people opening doors, being nice, being friendly, going out of your way to maybe do things, even though you won't necessarily, get paid for it, don't necessarily expect something in return, but you're just doing it because you're nice, you're helping out a partner, you're helping out a colleague. It really does go a long way.
Oh, you're such a good Canadian boy. I love it.
You never know who you're
Thank
helping
you.
out, man. Very, very good advice. You never know who you're being nice to at the end of the day. So just
Exactly.
be nice as a rule of thumb, you know?
Just be nice. Doesn't cost anything.
No, and I actually learned that a lot through the wrestling world. You know how it is. You go to a wrestling event, everybody walks around, shakes your hand, says hello. It's all about being polite, and the wake that we leave in life is really important. The wake meaning like you're in a boat, you know, the wake behind your boat.
Yep.
It's the same for a human living our life. We're leaving a wake, a trail behind us of who we've influenced, and to give a helping hand to somebody, like you say, you might not make anything from it, but it's certainly going to give you the joy of being able to encourage other people, and be a part of the growth of other people. And I think that's something that's very lacking these days. There's a lot of loners out there. There's a lot of people who get very angry if people try and help or anything like that. I don't think it's very productive. We have to be able to help each other out for sure.
Agreed.
All right. Sean and John, any questions before we get to the 3 questions for Steve?
I've got one if Sean doesn't have one.
I'm fresh out.
All right. Okay.
Sean, we barely heard from you. Come on.
I know he's quiet today. It's all right. If we had the other hosts on the show, there'd be 3 people not asking.
Oh boy,
questions, so
yeah,
that's all good.
true. Or everybody talking over each other.
Yes.
Which happens often as well. But yeah, I had one last question. I hate to lean back into wrestling again, but do you find that over the years being involved in it, as in the multiple facets that you have, do you still enjoy it as kind of like something to watch or as like a performance art? Yeah, you never really lost that?
No, I never really lost it. I still enjoy it. I think it happens with every profession that you go into. You probably, if you enjoyed it before you got into the profession, you may enjoy it a little less or in a different way because you look at it a little more analytically. Like I remember, this is like one thing that stuck out from my magazine teacher back at Humber College, who said, when you're done with this class, you will never read a magazine article the same way because you will always go back to the things I taught you about the structure of how you write a magazine article. And he's right. And I think it's the same thing when you work, if you work in an entertainment medium, or, if you work in wrestling, you maybe look at it a little differently. I work in wrestling and in TV, so I have the benefit, or maybe it's the detriment of having to look at it through both lenses, right? And, so I can't necessarily watch a show on a Monday night or a Wednesday night without going, now why would they do that? Whether it's a wrestling question or a TV question. It doesn't necessarily mean I don't enjoy it less. Maybe I just enjoy it a bit differently and I'm a little more critical, but I still enjoy watching. I hope that answers your question, John.
It does, very accurately.
Yeah.
Sweet. I have a question for you too.
Yeah.
And this is the important stuff to me right now. So I need to know, what's your gear of choice and what wrestling groups have you shot for?
Okay. So as I mentioned, like I don't use photography as like my primary source of income. I don't make a lot of money off it. So I limit myself as far as how much I invest in equipment. So I use, right now I'm shooting on a Canon 70D. I have an 18 to 200 millimeter lens, which I really quite enjoy for a bunch of, again, it just gives you so much versatility. Not the best in low light situations, but I can work around it. And I have another, I just, in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, I bought a 20 to 70 millimeter lens. Don't use it that much. I'm not really shooting as much ringside photography at indie shows as I used to now that I'm ring announcing. And doing some other stuff behind the scenes. So I haven't really had much of a chance to use it. So that's my gear of choice. Sorry, your other question was?
Who have you shot for? Who have you worked with? Yeah.
So shot with PWI, as I mentioned. I've shot with Fighting Spirit Magazine, which is now defunct. But I honestly loved the look of their magazines. And they also had a very different editorial style. From what PWI was and still is. And all their pages were glossy, which PWI wasn't, if you'll remember. They had kind of like a middle section of those nice color glossy images, but then most of it was sort of that black and white newsprint.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. And unfortunately, again, the economy and, money situations, they unfortunately had to shut down.
What's a magazine?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. and oddly enough, like a couple have sort of popped up recently. I think that Inside the Ropes magazine is fairly recent. I think it's out of the UK as well. Fighting Spirit was out of the UK. So I have shot for Ring of Honor. I've actually shot for them. I have shot for WWE on 1 or 2 occasions. I have shot for the TSN website. I'm probably forgetting a couple, but those are primarily the ones.
Nice. Well, you go small. WWE, Ring of Honor. Start small.
That's honestly, like, that's sort of been the coolest thing, is that, and again, I don't look at it that way unless I sort of reflect back, and unless I look at what some of the other people are doing, and people ask me like, oh, how'd you get in? And like, if I could duplicate it, if I thought you could accomplish it, I would tell you. But I really think it's such a byproduct of the era and of my specific situation where I was, working for the broadcast partner of WWE, that it just put myself in this incredibly rare and unique situation that, like, I honestly don't know that it could be duplicated now.
Makes sense. I mean, it's definitely an individual story I've never heard. So that says something. Very cool. All right. If we have no other questions, we've got 3 questions for you, Steve. The first question is one that you already know. We asked you this in our email. So the challenge that we like to issue our viewers. For those of you who have been watching our show for a while, we'd like to have our guest issue a challenge to our viewers in the spirit of, using the insight and the experience of our guest to challenge our viewer to try something new, to do something that you may not have done before. Steve, you had a great one. Maybe you can, if you remember it, you can tell the world.
I do. And I had kind of alluded to it earlier. Be a mentor. Use your experience to help someone else out, someone who's coming up behind you. Offer advice. And when you can, open the door for somebody, give someone an opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise get, make a reference, give someone a heads up about a job that you might have heard about. We're not going to be here forever. Like, I'm in my 50s, not that I'm planning on slowing down anytime soon. I think I just look at things a little differently now. And I really, whether it was in broadcasting or, wrestling or wrestling photography, like, I'm at this stage in my life where I just really want to help out the next generation. I really feel that calling, that obligation. And I really think it's part of our humanity. And I think it really, not to sound too corny, I really think it will make it's something that makes the world a better place. So, in this time of where everyone's divided, let's try to help out a brother and a sister.
No, it's absolutely true.
Where were you in the running for Prime Minister of Canada? Come on. Come on. I would have voted for
That's
you.
That's nowhere near as cool as a job as he's already got.
No, exactly.
It's a pay cut.
They couldn't afford me.
That's awesome.
It's funny because, I mean, I've had people come to me for help through the photography and wrestling and stuff like that. And I love it. It makes me feel great. Do you have a lot of the local wrestling people or photographers and that coming to you and asking for advice?
I don't know about a lot, but yeah, I have had quite a few of them come up. I mean, a lot of them is, how do you get to shoot WWE or how do you get to shoot AEW? And, again, it was a unique situation. You have to put yourself in the right situation. But, what I generally tell people is just, you keep working hard at your craft, and if you're talented enough, you will get noticed. It may take longer, but if it's something you're passionate about, you keep at it and you'll get there eventually. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight, and you have to be patient sometimes.
And it's not going to happen if you just sit back and don't email Bill Apter or write a letter to Bill Apter or somebody in that position that doesn't have to be Bill Apter. I'm just using that as your example. You know what I mean? Like just to get yourself out there, to put yourself into a position, like you said, to do these things that you want to do. You know, it's funny. I saw an interview with somebody and they said, how will you meet the girl of your dreams? Well, first off, stop going to bars, go to places that you love to do things, and you will meet people that love to do the things that you love to do.
And get off Tinder.
Yeah. But it's the same thing with your career. How do you grow your career? Well, you do the things you love to do, and you network yourself out with people that do those things. And if you're good, like you say, somebody will catch on and they'll bring you up there. Awesome. I love that. Be a mentor. All right. Question number 2, which you don't know the question yet, is what is your tool of the trade? That one thing that you rely on every time you have to go to work. Doesn't have to be a physical tool. It could be a mental tool. It could be a trick that you tell yourself. But what is that one thing that you kind of rely on to do the best job you can do?
Wow. That's a great question. I would say preparation. And I think that would apply to anything, whether it's, physically preparing, to go out on a shoot for wrestling, making sure your batteries are charged, making sure you have enough memory cards, knowing who you're shooting, knowing what the storylines are. Those kinds of things are very important. You're not just showing up to shoot a bunch of random things. If you know what the highlights are, if you know what the storylines are, you can kind of better anticipate what's coming next. I find that actually very unique to pro wrestling. Not everybody can shoot it, and I think you have to be following it, especially if you're shooting ringside. As you know, Brian, especially, like if you're a second late, you're a second late. Like you're gonna miss it, and a lot of times you have to know what's coming. And again, it's not like somebody's whispering in your ear, "Hey, this guy's about to do a hurricanrana off the top rope." No, like if you watch this guy, or you think what's coming, and you could at least put yourself in the right position to do it. Again, same thing in the media industry, reporter, producer, again, be prepared as much as you can, and be prepared for anything, because, it's a hard thing to say, like, be prepared for what you may not be prepared for, but the more the better equipped you're going to be to deal with any challenges that you don't see coming.
Absolutely. Great advice. And the final question is, what's your jam? What's that song that just gets you going? You can't skip past. It's the 5-star every time you hear it. Just that one song that just gets you jazzed. You can't live without it.
Wow. God, there are so many of them probably. I love Paradise by the Dashboard Light.
Oh, right on.
It's probably, it's a long enough song. I literally know every word. Probably knowing my family when it comes on the radio. So I'd have to go with that one.
That's awesome. It's kind of funny, actually. I'm a bit weird, and obviously, but me, no kidding. But when COVID all first started, and Meatloaf was this big anti-vaxxer guy, and he went around preaching, don't get your vaccinations. And then he died from COVID.
Wait, that happened?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yikes.
I kind of was like that whole, like, even like Eric Clapton, all these guys that are preaching this stuff. I kind of took them off my Spotify. I took them off my playlists, and I was just like, write that stuff off. I'm not interested in these guys. But what a great song that is. What a great tune that is.
I had a copy of that record.
Oh,
it was my
Meatloaf.
mom's, but I used
to listen to it all the time. I need to listen to that. I'm not going to be that weird anymore. Yeah. It's awesome.
Love the format.
Awesome. Okay, well, that's it. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. You have survived the conversation with us, and I'm very happy for it. I know some people haven't, so that's impressive.
Oh, wow. All right. Where are the bodies buried?
Brian?
Can't tell you. I have to tell you too. Anyway, I really appreciate you taking the time. I've said it a million times already. I really, really mean it. You're a great guy. You're a great photographer. I'm so happy that we got a chance to talk about what you do for your real life, because a lot of this stuff I had no clue, and it's really interesting. John and Sean, anything you'd like to add before we say goodnight?
Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, I've gotten a
pleasure.
motivational speech too. Wow. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to my LinkedIn page and start advertising myself as a mentor. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, thank you
Steve.
guys. Thanks for the time, Brian. I certainly appreciate all the kind words, and it's been great talking to you. We certainly don't get enough of a chance to talk at wrestling shows, so
No,
it was good to have this time together.
That's awesome. Okay, guys. Sean, John, thank you both for being here this week. Steve, can't thank you enough. I already tried. And for the rest of you who've tuned in through this whole show, thank you as well. We really appreciate you taking the time. Maybe give us a like, maybe subscribe to our channel, tell a friend that we're doing this, because we're having a blast doing this thing. There's so many neat people that we get to talk to, and we've got so many episodes we've already shot that you can go back and listen to. So thank you very much, and have a great week. We'll see y'all next time.
Peace.
See you guys.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh, ooh.